Tonight it's my pleasure to be joined by Joshua Coombes. Welcome to Hawkwood Online, Joshua.
Cheers, Matt. Very happy to be having this conversation this evening, and thanks for obviously to Hawkwood for hosting this. Yeah, looking forward to how this evening goes and talking about some things. Yeah.
Well, it'll be great to to welcome you to site when we get to that stage and to continue the work in the real world. But I was until then, I guess I first came across your work probably quite soon after you started. It must have been like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, maybe slightly longer. But I'm interested in how you got started, because I know you had a real connection with music, and music was a huge part of your life. But how did you go from playing guitar and being a musician and that being your world? Like, how did this whole thing come about, where you went from being like, I'm going to play guitar to something else?
Yeah, that's actually a really good place to start. Sometimes when I talk about the work I'm doing now, I sort of forget some of the most vital pieces, or what was really like the catalyst for me with all of this stuff. So, I mean, when I was younger, I don't know how many people experienced the same thing, but my secondary school, I went in, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and within about 4 years, the whole thing sucked the life out of me, really. I think there probably wasn't like an authentic moment personally. I was trying to be somebody the whole time. So you either, were mates with the hard kids, and I was being funny and being like kind of liked was the main goal. I didn't come out with like any GCSEs and any grades to speak of. So actually, like, finishing school, I left with like this pretty huge sense of, failure, and feeling like, what is it I'm going to do? Like, what is the next stage for me? And needless to say, I was kind of messing around and wasn't all that engaged in my schoolwork. But thinking back now, there's definitely some teachers who, make you sort of feel like this is it, this is the end. But luckily, it kind of changed for me, because my auntie gave me her record collection, actually, which was full of all of this 77 punk vinyl from the UK or America. What happened here in London obviously was happening in New York, in CBGBs, and yeah, that kind of really was this injection of what I needed at the time, being this kid who had no direction, didn't know what the future liked whatsoever. But the idea of this kind of movement that happened 30 years before me, even though when I came of age, punk was something that, wasn't ever dead, but it certainly wasn't as prominent. But there was this new punk scene happening, and I bought a guitar, and so did like a lot of people in the town I grew up in, Exeter, and I met kind of my tribe after school, really. So to be really honest, like, people from school, there's not anyone I keep in touch with, but people outside of that circle, other people who felt the same about music. That was actually one of the most important things that happened to me early on, because from that sense of no GCSEs and feeling like I was failing, guitar was hope, and so was being in a band and being kind of being part of something. And the cool thing about punk music, even though it's like mohawks and piercings sometimes from the outside and has this like fierce, spiky exterior, the essence of what it is really incredibly welcoming. If you're weird, then you're in, really, and kind of if you're a bit of an outcast and you don't know what you're up to, it's a great genre it kind of brings you in and puts an arm around you. And there was a club in Exeter called the Cavern Club, which I pretty much owe kind of most of who I am today to, because they believed in you and they put our first band's EP out, and those 5 friends I met turned into 30 friends. And honestly, if I was to put down wherever I'm at today, before talking about anything else, it's like it all stems from that moment of feeling like there was no future to feeling like there was a future. And for me, that all started with music. Yeah.
So was that at that point, like, I know a lot of those references, and I used to listen to a lot of those records, still listen to some of them, and there's a huge social conscience present in much of that music, and a political, view, or at least, it offers alternatives to what you might see on regular news stations, for example. So I mean, was that a conscious thing at the time? Were you just loving the music and the community, or were you already, do you think, like feeling there's change that I would like to see happen at that stage?
I think it was that political aspect that really spoke to me along with the music. What was great about music, especially like punk rock, is that actually you didn't have to be a very good musician to get started. Like it wasn't like jazz, you could just if you learned three chords, you had a punk song. So like there was this really easy, accessible kind of place to get started. But then also, yeah, it was the political aspect, because it started speaking to me about things I learned. But I became educated through music, through the Clash, through Joe Strummer and people like that. And like, that was it. Just all I need is my brain works in a different way, and I need it told to me in a different way. And through music and lyrics, it was all I was receiving everything. And the Clash, like their songs range from what the war in Vietnam and the Spanish Civil War to politically what was happening in the UK at the time when they were releasing albums, and the way the world was turning them. But it reflected all of the things that we still see today. So yeah, that side of things was educational, very educational, and the accessibility was the bit that was also great, because I've definitely worked out in time. I'm much better at things if you can get started straight away. Anything that seems like a long way off and you have to study really hard for,
Yeah.
not so good at.
So like, I mean, the fact that you're not doing musical, well, at this stage, at least, musical benefits to help people, I guess at some point you fell into the role of learning to dress people's hair as well, right? So like, was that just a job? Was that something you really wanted to do? Did you find it through a friend? Like what? So you're in the Cavern, you're playing gigs, you're putting an EP out, you've got this great community, and then all of a sudden, was it like a part-time job thing initially or something?
Actually, do you know what? It took a couple of things to happen in my life where I needed a real transition and change. I'd been touring with different bands, another band called The Computers that I was touring with like early 20s, and that all came to an end. Actually, really what happened is I was in a long-term relationship that I kind of completely it ended in an absolute explosion, and that was due to me and my fault, and it was this kind of moment actually that was pretty profound for me and what I'm later doing now, because I needed a complete change. I had already thought about hairdressing. What happened was music was ending, but my whole life changed slightly, and yeah, actually I took a year after that relationship ended to really kind of like do some self work and put the pieces back together, and I did that as I was training to become a hairdresser. And the first moment, really, to be honest, with getting into hairdressing and that kind of work, it actually wasn't, if I'm really being transparent, it wasn't because of like some great love for the industry and some passion for like the craft at the time. I really learned to love it, but it was more just that I could play guitar, and I was like, well, I know these hands are good at that kind of thing, not so much at digging holes and
keep looking to the right.
And going and kind of, and for me, I just thought, yeah, how I was naive, because I thought, how hard can it be? I'm going to walk into a salon and see if they can perhaps train me. And it was a friend of a friend whose dad's salon it was, and I ended up, yeah, going in their mid-20s and asking whether there's a chance they could take me on, and they did, thankfully. And then it was just what I needed as therapy, to be honest, because it was a way to spend time listening to people in the salon. It took my mind off things. I also think it was a really important process for me to go back to square one, like something brand new, where, truth be told, it wasn't that easy training, because I'm there. It's one of the only things where you get watched by the person as you're working on them, when you're training. So it's kind of it's pretty nerve-wracking to begin with, but I built a lot of confidence through that, and I quickly realized, once I got past the kind of moments of anxiety, thinking I was going to ruin someone's life with the wrong snip of the scissors, I ended up realizing that not only was I, of course, giving someone a haircut to make them look and feel good on the outside, but it was that being there for somebody in person and actually listening to them, and some people would just be a bit of chit chat, but other people would really tell you about their lives and really confide in you, and that was, for me, the kind of part that I hadn't anticipated, that I was incredibly thankful for, and eventually led me to do this in a different way, in a different environment. That connection is kind of has been the most important part now of cutting hair for me to this day.
So that took you to London, did it? Was that how you moved from Devon? Is that how you came away from Exeter to London for work?
Yeah, exactly. And I knew I wanted a bit of a change, and I was away for a little while at the country, and I came back, and then yeah, I decided to move up here. Had some pals up here, and it was like I knew I wanted to come here at some point in my life and spend some time here. And always used to come up here for gigs and stuff anyway, and it just made perfect sense at the time. And yeah, and then working, you know, in a salon, it didn't last as long for me as I thought, because, you know, I was thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to start working and doing this thing now, and probably, you know, this will be my career. But I was only actually really working in a salon for a couple of years before that changed for me.
Do you remember that first moment when? Do you remember the first person and the first moment when you stepped out of the salon with all of your gear in the bag, your scissors and the clippers and everything? Do you remember the first time as you left the salon that all of a sudden you completely changed what you were going to use your tools for?
Yeah, I do. I feel like it's you know, I knew something was brewing for me, wanting to like make a bit of a change, because I was always moving up to London. Of course, like any city or town you go to in the UK, you're going to see people who are sleeping rough and people who are hard up. But in London, especially, it just became something that I couldn't really, you know, I wasn't ignoring it really. I was going to say I couldn't ignore, but I wasn't. You know, I was doing the things that I could do, like giving someone some pocket change, buying someone a cup of tea or coffee. But I was always intrigued, walking off thinking, God, I wish I spent a bit more time talking to that person and found out a bit about their life. And when I was reading articles about homelessness and looking at the statistics, it didn't really make me feel any better, to be honest. And scrolling through social media, all the problems we do face in the world, it can leave you feeling pretty fatigued. Like, how the hell am I, as one person, gonna work this thing out when yeah, I'm seeing someone at every tube stop, at every supermarket, and all that kind of thing. But yeah, the first time I met someone and I actually gave them a haircut, it was a bit of a, I don't know, it wasn't a planned thing. You know, I didn't plan to go out. It was just I had my backpack with me with, like, I've got these cordless clippers and my scissors and stuff, and quite a lot of things that make it mobile to cut hair anywhere. And I was on the way to someone's house to cut their hair and earn a bit of money outside of work, like a bit of pocket money. And yeah, I stopped and spoke to somebody, and again had a chat with them. But this time I remembered, oh, I've got my things on me in my backpack, and it was sort of in that moment I thought, oh yeah, I'm gonna have a chat. And then when the time was right, I asked them whether they wanted a haircut, and spent the next couple of hours with them. You know, obviously the haircut wasn't that long, but it was that particular moment where it was a tipping point for me, because I didn't. I was thinking about it the wrong way before, perhaps. I was thinking, like, you know, I had to come up with some solution to this. And, you know, I didn't see the power as an individual before, like how I could just spend time, and that time, and how important that is for people when, especially when they're isolated, especially when they're lacking some of those connections in their life usually. And in the moments that I wrapped a cape around someone, you know, I remember quite well, yeah, it was getting all my things out on the floor next to me, and you know, feeling kind of just everything, like the concrete beneath me, and being down on that level for an hour, seeing those like footsteps walk by, hundreds of people, because it was a busy area of London. It was quite an injection of empathy straight away for like just the environment. And then what came with that was how this act of a haircut provided, like, as I said, like this great moment in the mirror at the end where I, you know, made someone look good and kind of cleaned them up. But it wasn't that really that struck with me straight away. It was just having somebody there outside of their usual circle, coming to them where they are on the street, because I think that part's important, and just spending some time with no strings attached. And because, you know, the next time that I saw this person afterwards, it wasn't, oh, can you cut my hair again? Can you cut my hair again? It was like, hey, here's what I've been up to. I want to tell you about this and this and this. And it was sharing how they were in that time. And yeah, they introduced me then to their friends, and I started going out more often and doing this, you know, regularly on the day off. Some evenings I'd go out, my backpack, I'd get a bit more prepared and take some things that made more sense to cut hair outside, like some dry shampoo that you can spray someone's hair with before. And yeah, do all I could, you know, to make it as close to the salon as possible. And it wasn't long before I started like sharing these stories, because I realized the people I was meeting, it just dissolved all these stigmas that I think surround this issue, because that for me is like one of the biggest problems we got to get past. Is there's all these really negative stereotypes surrounding it, and the people I was meeting, it just dissolved all of that within a few weeks.
Yeah. So that's the turning point in then making this experience public, right? Because you've met a bunch of people, you've seen the transformation, but you're wanting to now communicate that. It's not just, you know, it's one thing, it's quite a personal act, it's quite an individual thing to work with, you know, with a person on a one-to-one, and, you know, spend that time, that no strings attached thing. But then it's like, I need to share this with more people. So was that just like, was it just one of those things where you just like, did the hashtag and everything come out of, you know, the whole thing come out of that first post?
Well, yeah, actually, I was thinking of like a hashtag that would be cool to connect with it. And I remember texting my friend Helen, who I used to work in the salon with, and I was like, oh, does this sound all right? We sort of came up with it together while I was like sat somewhere, and I was like, yeah, I just thought I wanted to come up with something. So do something for nothing is the hashtag. And I started when I didn't used to use Instagram and that very much, and when I did, it was always left me feeling weird at how many likes you get when your face is the feature of the photo, you know. And it's like I've just suddenly realized like this is a good place to try and share this stuff, and I thought the hashtag would be good because it provides other people with an opportunity to say, what's your version of this? You know, I already knew that the haircut wasn't the main focus for me. It was about this, you know, going out, getting over those feelings of sat at home, as I said earlier on, feeling fatigued, sat on the sofa, scrolling through Twitter, and turn it into some form of action. And yeah, that was the decision to post this stuff on Instagram. I'm really thankful for that, because it's such a great image sharing platform, and it's changed a bit now, but still it's a great place to stop people while they're scrolling with this before and after photo. And you know, maybe actually I could share my screen and go through like a couple of those now. I might try and do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, the way that I do things usually, and this is the hashtag, is you know, when I meet people, I was given more haircuts and I started to travel to different places, but I'll always do these before and after pictures of different people that I meet. And sometimes obviously it is like quite a drastic transformation, which is beautiful. But this was the signpost that would stop people scrolling on Instagram and on social media, and hopefully stop for, you know, a few minutes and read onto their story. And I just, you know, write what happened between us on that day. I was never really obsessed with the exact reason of why somebody became homeless. I was more interested in kind of what people liked and what they enjoyed. And I think they're just as valid questions. I think when people are, you know, like people experiencing homelessness, I feel like one of the biggest mistakes I was making before was forgetting about people's identity beyond this word, you know, like all the hopes, dreams, and passions and wants and desires, and, you know, all the things that we all have. And I was trying to get to know people on that level, and these photos and these images were, yeah, as I said, a really good way to hopefully get people in a bit deeper. And obviously social media is not all that easy to do that with our attention span. And but it was working, you know, and it was working really well, and people started to share these photos. But then the hashtag became this space where other people got involved with smaller actions, you know, and not small compared to what I was doing, but I just mean, even for instance, it was people using like tangible skills and time, which was beautiful. Like there was like yoga teachers and dance teachers going into rehabilitation centers and volunteering their time. Sometimes it was things more simple, like there were some students who went in to have lunch with some senior citizens who don't have any family who go in to see them. And even sometimes just people, I don't know, it may seem like, you know, a small thing, but someone helping their neighbor with their shopping home, and you know, just those really neighborly things, I think, were really nice too. So the hashtag became the space for people to share. And for me, it's when things started to grow and it got picked up a bit by the media, and then I ended up quitting my job before too long, after a few months of doing this, and started to travel. You know, I started to travel all over the place to keep telling these stories and keep kind of putting this message out there. And that was actually, you know, a decision that I'm so glad for now. At the time, I didn't know exactly kind of like where I was going to go and what I was going to do, but I was relying on friends initially who I knew who might have a spare sofa or a spare room. And I went out to a few places in America, went over to Paris, which has become a place I go to a lot and do this. Yeah, so things started to kick off.
I mean, I love when I first, got my head around that as well, that do something for nothing is a movement rather than an individual. It's not about promoting one way of doing things, even never that, it's not about you, you're doing this thing where you're leading the way with your skill, and you're doing that with people that are living on the streets, right? So you've got this approach which is like, I can do this. I give my time, I listen, it's open-hearted, you're not expecting any return. In fact, explicitly, it doesn't involve money, like you're going there to do it because you want to do it. But like you say, it creates an opportunity for anybody and society, to think about what it is you can give. Like, in what way could I be of service to my local surroundings and what it might need, and that can be specifically people living on the streets around you. It could be that, it's other things, like you said, helping someone with their shopping home, just being conscious and noticing what needs there are local to where you are, and then what it is that you can offer to bring about a little bit more harmony and equilibrium.
Definitely. And it's like, these are 4 words that, this is part of, for me, an inherent part of being a human being. We wouldn't have evolved to live in these citadels of like many people. And when you look around, sometimes you think, how do we get here? And it wasn't certainly from, it was from sharing initially, and kind of like living in these smaller communities. And that's why I won't debate anyone on whether that's an inherent part of like being a human, is kind of looking out for one another. And of course that used to be more primal, and now we've evolved past that. But I think the danger is now we do need a healthy injection of this, I think, because we're living in like the most distracted time that we ever have. We're busier than ever. For every new technology and everything that no one gets any more leisure time with this new world we're in. We're working even harder and longer hours. So the machine's churning, and we're doing more and working more. And sometimes I speak to people, and I do it too, I don't know when to stop working, and work bleeds into everything. And you sort of go, was this the promised land, way back sort of 50, 60 years ago, when we sort of saw the future? And look, my point is that do something enough is my version of it, and other people are using it in some way, but this is what people do anyway. We all do this when we remember. You try and look at your bus driver and say hello when you get on the bus, rather than just tapping the card,
Yeah.
And you try and, when you see someone's not in a good way, you might ask if they're all right. So this isn't revolutionary. It's a big reminder, and I'm so, honestly, it means a lot to me when other people use this specifically, because it's a place where I can see it, but they'd be doing those things anyway, which is beautiful. And yeah, it's very hopeful for me, especially when I go into schools and give talks, and that kind of fresh thinking, next generation, it's hopefully embedding some of this for the future that I'm really passionate about. And I know it's not easy sometimes too, as well, because I do know that we're busy, and sometimes we don't want to talk to anyone, and it's all relative to your day and how things are going. But when you have the time, when you're presented with that moment, which I think we all are at some stage in our life, it's like getting a bit out of your comfort zone and reaching out to people. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's always easy when I'm going out and doing this, because people are in a bad way. It's a very sensitive place people are in when they're living in like one of the harshest environments, like out in the elements, wondering where you're going to sleep. There's issues with addiction, there's mental health issues, there's all kinds of complications that come with this lifestyle. But it's taught me so much, because there's a shield and a barrier to a lot of this stuff that I realized before existed for me. And in penetrating it, I've realized that it was mostly my own callus that I'd built to like just get in the way of the interaction. The reality is people are humans, and I try and read people's energy when I'm going over to say hello and check out what's going on. But there's these layers that start appearing, and we all have them when we're in a certain amount of pain or we've been through trauma in our life. And sometimes those layers are really, really thick. And I just now know that if I don't get that kind of initial interaction with someone, I'll go back and see them a few times, and it's about building trust. And God, as far as like learning about humans and these experiences I've had, like I'm incredibly grateful for them, for my own. I try to understand myself as well as part of this journey.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, another thing I'm really grateful for is the fact that not only are these before and after photographs that you were describing so well, and how powerful that was in stopping people in their tracks as they were scrolling, is filming, you know, as well. The fact that you've managed to capture some of the stories in people's own voices as well, and then give voice using your platform, using the people that are following you and the people that, you know, you're engaging with that. So I'd love to show something if we can show one of those short films. We could show something else a bit later, but maybe we could show like a short example of you in action. I think we've got the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. This, I think, if we have a video here that we're going to play, I think this is one. It's kind of people we met,
Yeah.
people I met throughout Europe, and yeah, mainly in Europe.
One bad judgmental person who doesn't think I'm a human being. There's 9 Mancunians who support me, give me hope, give me love, get me a cup of tea, get me something to eat, go, John, we can't wait to see you back on your feet. That's what keeps me going, and the lads like yourselves who stop and give me 5 minutes of time. So just thank you and look after yourselves.
All these people don't seem to realise that before we were homeless, we had lives as well. I've been reading my book, right, because I read a lot now. I've had quite a few people surprised that I'm even reading at all, you know.
I'll get people walk past me every single day. You don't stop. Probably get 5 people out there, 100 people that will walk past me. I'll stop and chat to them. Which is a shame, really. It's a shame.
I can do a lot back because I have a lot of love inside me. If you get love, you have to give love back. And I don't know in what kind of way you have to give it back, but it's the little things that count, you know?
You know what I've learned now? I've started to love people, you know? I'm starting to see now that we're all part of this, you know? And we're all brothers and sisters, you know? I cannot enjoy life completely if another person would not enjoy it, you know? I understand that. I understand why it is necessary that we all are together, you know?
Keeping faith with each other. That's what life's all about.
You don't want to live here for a long time, but if you stay for a short time, I think you get to know who you really are and who other people are.
Have a little bit of love, spread it, because not just you. Do you know what I mean? We're all in this shit together. We all came into this world the same way, we'll all go out the same way. We all end up in the same size fucking box.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a powerful, you know, that's just a small snapshot of you know, the last 5 years, but it's such a power. Every time I see the interactions, you know, I see this, you know, hear the stories. Yeah, it's incredibly moving.
Well, we've got you to thank for the score there, Matt.
Yeah.
Matthew Shaw on the music there, which I'm very grateful for, because it's important with this stuff, I think, to try and let it guide itself, because look, like sometimes shooting this and doing this, you know, I've learned how to use a camera a bit more, and it's always, you know, it's always nice to capture these moments, and it's not ever like really high production, but I quite like it because it's the street and it's the feel. And I think the messages and some of the things that I hear from people, it's incredibly profound. And I think one of the reasons for that is you're confronted with a side of life that some of us have to flirt with from time to time when we're not in a good position. But when you've lost it all, at least materialistically speaking, you know, you're left with yourself, and you're left with the humans around you who either give a shit about you or they don't. And it tunes people into a part of themselves, which I think we could all take a lesson from. And, you know, not in some exploitative, voyeuristic way, just in a way of, not only is it important to listen to people for their own well-being, but for me on a personal level, like, you know, I meet people who are street shamans to me, people I spent like a day or two with on end and followed them around the city. And it's yeah, it's important. I think it's important to some of the people I see, they're seeing it all day, the city and how things work and how people interact in their everyday beelines towards whatever they're doing that day. So there's a perspective that's yeah, very, very profound sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I see exactly what you just described through your work, you know, starting with those initial posts, but then as you started to film and share these shorter clips of film that you were doing as well, and, you know, talks, being invited to go and talk at places, and then the book, you know, I've been reading through, you know, your book that's coming out very soon. This is the US edition, right, of the book that's coming. And what really struck me reading this and hearing you describe the stories and quoting people as you're chatting to them is the amount of love and empathy and compassion and will to help other people. But it doesn't just come from you, right? The really surprising thing, maybe it's not surprising, but one of the things that I had to keep remembering as I was reading the book is the generosity, the love, the compassion, the empathy. It's from every single person, almost, you know, 100% of the people that you meet. And there's a couple of exceptions where people disappear and you don't know where they are, you don't know what happened, right? But then you've got all of the people where seemingly have almost nothing, seemingly are at a point, you know, and actually in terms of possession, security, finance, fixed abode, bank accounts, jobs, and all, like none of those things there. And yet, if they see somebody or meet somebody that they consider to be less well off than they are, even given all of those factors, they're the first people to offer generosity and to offer help. It comes up again and again and again, that theme.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that, you know, when you're removed from the world of possessions that we hold on to so dearly around us, you know, you that's what you've got, and you realize that you have to share, like I said earlier, to survive. But it is beautiful, because that generosity it's incredible, really. It's incredible the amount of people I've met who are generous to one another in that sense. Like, you know, sometimes, of course, like anywhere, you know, any walk of life, it can be a bit dog eat dog. It depends on who you are. But there's times where, you know, I met this family in Skid Row. Skid Row is one of these areas of Los Angeles, which is like, you know, basically a 30 to 50 block radius of tents. It's a big tent city in downtown LA, or just, you know, neighboring to downtown LA. And, you know, it's incredible how dehumanized people are there, and how it's all left. And, you know, it's just, you know, it's really, the conditions are awful. But, you know, I started going down there more and getting to know people, and I was staying there for a couple of months. And I met this family who, not only were they generous with their time, but they also, I know for a fact, I could have slept there that night if I needed to, you know, and I could have, they probably would have offered me a drink and something if I needed to too. I'm just gonna, like, as I talk about this, I've just realized that they're in these photos that I've got here. So this is Skid Row in LA, and you can see obviously like the tents really do line the streets, and it is hard to know what to do when you've got, you know, when you're confronted with this. But that's where, as you're saying, like the film, the documentary side of it, the kind of photography, any way you can try and express this stuff. And I personally think creatively is really important, because sometimes it is a bit too harsh when, look, you just got those images of kind of these tents. It's even more important to try to tell the stories of people behind them. And this is that family I was talking about, Adam, Tiffany, and Brandon. And obviously, you know, they've got a young child there, and you'll find that a lot in the United States. There's you know, families living out of cars and people living in tents, and it's real, you know, it's really, it's the tourists don't get to see much of it, but you know, nor actually a lot of the residents. But when you go down there and you start sniffing around, you realize this stuff is happening. And you know, these guys, as you mentioned with Generosity, they were so lovely. They came along and they I had this little video that I won't play now, but they offered me anything I needed, and I cut Adam's hair and we hung out. But when I go back now, I always go back and see them, and they're in the book actually. So yeah, Adam, Tiffany, and Brandon are inside the book, and you probably read about them.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was another point that came up again as well, is that particularly in the US, in those chapters when you're in the different US cities, so many people are working jobs, and not just one job, sometimes many jobs. So it's not a simple situation that you've got somebody living on the street in a tent, but it could well be that there's a long-term employment thing going on there as well. So they're still working a regular job, they're still, you know, paying tax, they're still doing all the things that somebody with a, you know, living in a house or an apartment or a flat would be doing. Mm-hmm. So it's really quite complex in terms of how those relationships work, isn't it?
It is, it really is. And I think that, you know, for all the will in the world, even for, say, you know, the more compassionate mainstream media channels, which, you know, is very hard for any of them to really go that much deeper. A lot of the time it's these wide angle shots from afar that, as I said, are quite dehumanizing. And like, you know, that's 90% of people's view of this. Like, some, you know, you got to remember, like, it's getting beamed into someone's TV, and that's their view of this issue. And it's like, that's why it's even more important. There's incredible people all over doing everything they can to tell stories. I meet amazing people from, you know, my friend Aji in Paris to this guy I know, Paulie in LA, going out on Skid Row all the time. There's incredible photographers who are trying to tell these stories in different ways. And I think that's where it's even more important to use anything you have to sort of get beyond the surface of this issue. And yeah, my version of that here is now the book, because all these stories I was posting on Instagram and social media, that's great, but it is quite short-lived, you know, and it takes one person to start following to maybe scroll back. But the good thing is having it here, and actually this is the UK cover here as well. So it's the same book inside, but we've got two different covers for the different editions, but it's full up with stories of different people. And the hope is that that will go a long way to, you know, reach people who aren't on social media and from different categories, different age brackets, and different people who are interested in having this tangible thing to pick up. And of course, with the stories, there's themes that run through underneath them. And I think they're the kind of themes that we can all relate to, you know, the things that happen in our lives that sometimes we haven't got any control over, that actually are just, you know, they're on the horizon for all of us. But you can only hope that when something like that happens, you've got a support network and you've got people around you. And often people ask me, like, what's the reason why, if you could put it down to one reason why someone ends up living on the street? And of course, you have all these like surface reasons and factors that contribute to that first night someone would be faced with the prospect of finding somewhere in a city to curl up and close your eyes. But you're also underneath it, I'd always say that it's this support network, you know, this kind of lack of a safety net. Because sometimes I think about like where I'd go if I, you know, had £0 in my bank account. I'd you know, lost any form of like getting any money anytime soon. Couldn't pay my rent, you know, in a vulnerable position financially. But then, you know, where would I go if I had my backpack? And I think about friends I'd go and stay with in London first, until, you know, I annoyed, you know, boyfriends or girlfriends got annoyed with me and they kicked me out. And I'd, you know, then I'd move along a bit. I'd probably go down to Bristol and knock on my sister's door there on the way down to Devon, where I'd finally go back to, you know, my mum and my sister there. And then, you know, it wouldn't be that easy to knock on people's door. And the point I want to get to with this is, you've got to remember, we all have a sense of pride, and to go down and like knock on someone's door, even who you know cares about you. I've spoken to people who do have someone, and they don't even want to, they don't want to reach out to them, because they don't want someone to know they're in this position. Because pride is like a incredible thing we hold on to as people, and it's a shame, but you know, we can all relate to that. And some people, they might even have that door they can knock on, but they're like, I don't want to see someone like this. Like, I don't want anybody to see me like this. And, you know, if they're dirty and they don't look themselves and they're ashamed of themselves. And that's kind of what's in here too, as well, is like, hopefully those nuances in people's lives that we can just forget about this word homelessness, even though of course it's very on point, you know, and it's what I do, but it's like, this is a human conversation I try and have in here, and less of a political one, more than just one that hopefully people can relate to on those finer points.
Yeah, 100%. And you do it, you know, it's what the work does. So, you know, we can we can put some links in, and also to, you know, to make the point, you're donating all of the money, you know, to be able to help people beyond this as well with the art projects that you do. So the books, you know, we'll put the links to the pre-orders in the chat, but it's not even, we're not putting them in there so, you know, people can buy loads of books. It's not like a make money thing. It's like the money's going to then go to actually continue the work happening, isn't it?
Exactly. So yeah, I'll put those in the chats now, like where to order it in the UK, pre-order it in the UK and the US. So the idea with the book is, yeah, it's you know, it's great because you have I put them in the chat now, I think. So there's the publishers are doing their bit and they're donating, you know, and it's amazing. Like, thank God they're both, like, we got this proposal together, and how supportive and lovely they've been to make this thing happen. You know, that's, I don't think anyone's on this call particularly, but it's an incredible step and an amazing way to get this out there in the world. But they're covering their costs, then they're donating £1 or $1 per sale, but then any of my proceeds, they're getting seeded for future not-for-profit art shows. So I put on an art show with one of my best friends, Jamie, who's a visual artist, and he paints these incredible portraits of people we meet. And actually Skid Row is one of the places that we have been and done this, one of the art shows, and other places in Europe. And his portraits and photos are really amazing. I think I might have some here to show, but basically, yeah, we started going to meet people down on Skid Row in LA, and this is Jamie and some of his artworks. And we put our first art show on in Skid Row, and the idea was, we called it Light and Noise because this is about trying to see people with love, and even when something may look really difficult to deal with on the outside, that's when I think your creativity kicks in. And as all of like Jamie's portraits we sold on the night, we donated the money to either people in the pictures. We invited everyone in, so, you know, like people on the street to come on in and be a part of it. And I screened a little video as well. We worked with local artists, and now we've actually taken this show from LA. We had our show back in London. We've had about 6 or 7 now in different countries. We got a bit of sponsorship to take the art show around to different cities from Tom's, which was incredible. That's Tom's. I've done a lot of work with them, and they sponsored the art show to take it from, you know, throughout Europe. And it's a great way of all this messaging that we're talking about in a tangible space. Having an art exhibition, you can sort of have this conversation and be in a room. And I think that will still, for me, always be the most powerful way to get a message across. So yeah, so the proceeds to make that point, that the proceeds, my version of that, are to support those in the future.
Yeah, and it's like, it's almost as, for me, it feels like, you know, it's the cycles move back to the first point. You start off in the Cavern in Exeter at punk rock shows, and then you're using art as a way of, you know, engaging people emotionally with the stories you've found over the last 5 years. It's, you know, it's...
Yeah, well, exactly. And, you know, I failed my art GCSE, failed my English GCSE. So yeah, I'm trying to tick them off as I go through life.
I think you're doing all right.
It's all just a fuck you to all my teachers, really. This is all, forget about everything I've just said in this conversation. This is just, I keep on just giving each one a invisible finger from the future. I'm joking. But yeah, it's cool because, yeah, for me, that's how I see things, and I try and work with people who have similar ideas, because I'm just like, it's a way of expressing things sometimes where the message is once removed. And of course, it's literal here in words. Like I, you know, that's a great form of communicating, but through the art pieces and through the video and through the photography, sometimes it is quite hard to stare like suffering right in the face, and our own suffering or other people's. And it's trying to sort of just, you know, ease in these messages through other means. And yeah, that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, it's amazing to see, you know, and I'm you know, I can't wait for people to see the books. You know, I was really privileged to get a copy to be able to you know, to understand more about that side of things for tonight. How
Yeah,
about
definitely.
how about we do a little bit more of showing what you've done, because we've got another film that we can show that we talked about or something. So are you up for that? Should we have a look at that as well and
For sure. Yeah,
see what happens? Like, you know, as well as talking about what happens, I think it's really powerful as well to see it.
definitely. Yeah, this film, it's one for people listening. You know, like, you know, whatever you're doing, stay on mute and make yourself a cuppa maybe, and kind of like drink it as you're watching it or whatever. Just like sit back, because it's about 12-13 minutes, but it's a really nice piece that for me is really important, of lots of people I met over the course of like a trip through West Coast America. And yeah, just had my camera out as I went. I've shot most of the stuff in here, and some of it's my friend Hal, who have worked together. Hal Samples is an amazing filmmaker, and yeah, edited by our friend Dylan. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it.
love with conditions isn't love at all. It's scientific, it's objective. There's a goal, and the goal is the condition to be met. But when there's no condition and it's just joyful freedom, that is the best kind of love. And it's, you know, it's acceptance, and it's forbearance, and it's tolerance, and it's enjoyment, and it's all of these things that you go through to nurture and sustain a loving feeling. Whether it be for another person or for your career or your private endeavor, hair cutting or my cello playing or whatever it is, my love for the cello is unconditional. I don't have the cello asks me for nothing. It doesn't even ask me to practice. I do that. I bring that to the table. So that's unconditional.
My message to the world: stay true to yourself and be yourself. Don't try to be a copycat of anybody that you see. The best thing you can be is be you. Be you.
I cannot buy back one moment in time. That's the most precious gift you have to give anyone. If you give a person your time, you cannot buy it back. You cannot spend $1 trillion a day to buy back a moment in time. It's the most valuable gift you have to give anyone.
What does that mean?
This is a birthmark. It means that I have the heart of a lion. It means doing what you gotta do.
No, this was just it was gifted to me, actually. Right now, just really like it. And one thing about me, my hands always stay dirty for some reason. Like I've learned myself. Like I've learned a lot about myself, like who I am. I think, you know. Even the negative stuff, man, you gotta like see it. Like, you know, you gotta like face it one time, you know, like, because then you become the real you. Not the person that you always claim to be, but like who you really are. You know, and once you do that, like that, you know, it's like that monster under the bed, kind of like, you know, he's not that bad no more. Like, yeah,
I like that, man.
It gets so dark that you won't see fear no more. So you no longer see fear. So from now on, you see clear.
Yeah, I'll be 67 in August.
So 70.
I'm pushing the big days. Like I said, I lost my brother at 59. Oh, well, that was the hardest thing in my life, man. I hated the Lord for a while because he took my brother away from me. Then I thought about it when I was walking around the park, and okay, he's in a good place. Thank you, Lord. I'm sorry what I said. You know, I just, this is my mom, my aunt, my uncle, and that's him. But I love my brother so much. Yeah. That's what I hate about it. I don't want to fucking cry, and I don't want to cry. I'm tired of crying.
Yeah.
You ain't the most hated though. You can take my life, take my freedom, take my joy, take my money, but you can't take this from my black ass. The most hated. I don't know why, but I know Jesus black. And a whole bunch of you gonna be surprised.
Peace of mind. Peace of mind. Simple peace of mind. I got peace. Why I say peace? I got peace now. Y'all got problems, you gotta go to work, you know, co-workers, all that.
Well, really, I'm crazy, but I'm crazy that make my decisions are being made not by me, but with the help of God, you know. And if you tell me that that's wrong, you're right. Tell me if anyone else out there have ever done something like this, right? Because I had doubts, as you had doubts, and I also feel exactly the same way as you feel. And I'm going to tell you something. The rest of them who wouldn't do that have now more doubts than we have doubts. Just like that. But I'll tell you, it's that God made this connection. And I know that. And I know that in fact. And God wants to bless us. And I'm going to tell you something. I will always consider it's like you always be with me.
Money, you know what they say, you know when people say money is the root of all evil? That quote is incorrect. Love of money is the root of all evil. That's what it says in the Bible. So it's wrong. That makes a difference, doesn't it?
Thank you. You know Jesus Christ? He lives in my body. Ex mir eli.
I like to put it in a more positive. I'm not motivated. Let's put it that way. To do a lot of things. You know, I'm just tired. You know, not. I also like it because the vulnerability comes out of the athletes there, because nobody's perfect, and nobody wants. And nobody expects them to be perfect. It depends on a lot of times on what you want to see.
Up in them crossroads, one time before, and I spoke with the devil, and he said to me, would you sell me your soul for a piece of gold? Would you sell me your soul for a piece of gold?
think you might be on mute there, Matt. Classic.
I was just saying thanks for sharing that with us tonight. You know, it's great to be able to show these things that, you know, that you've done, that, you know, they're not all available. So it's great to be able to, you know, for the people here tonight to see that.
Definitely, yeah. I appreciate people sticking with it and watching that. I know it's a bit of a long one, but it's a nice trippy look at different people and places. And I don't know, I started off after the intro with my friend Sakum Alan, and he was kind of the guy who I met with the cello double bass. Oh, he had a cello, but he also like he played many instruments at the time. He had a cello, and he was like this traveling street musician. And that interaction all sparked from him just asking me for a cigarette outside of Union Station in Los Angeles. Like, he came to me and was like, "Hey, have you got a cigarette, man?" And yeah, but just from there I didn't, so I didn't even give him that. But it was like, you know, it was cool because from that, it was like, I always think about him because from that initial conversation, we literally spent 2 days together, like, and he took me all around the city, and he even knew some piano shops. So when you saw those shots there, like there was a couple piano shops he'd go to in West Hollywood that would let him come in and play because he's a beautiful pianist. And even though he was homeless, they'd let him come in at the end of the day when no customers around, and they'd let him have a jam on the piano. And luckily I just sort of followed him about with a camera, and he was this magical person who, God, I only wish I could keep in touch with. We lost contact, had his Facebook, he stopped answering, not on purpose. I think it's just down, he closed his account or something, and had a number that doesn't ring anymore. But, you know, it lives on as a really beautiful experience for me, something like that, where I had these kind of short snippets of moments. And that for me is kind of the idea, you know. I started going out and thinking about this, I think, first of all, like, right, how can I completely help someone more than a haircut? How can I like try and offer them advice of where they might need to go and that thing and this thing? And I started relaxing with that a bit and going, that will happen when it's supposed to. And you know when someone's a bit ready for a bit more help, and they'll ask you, or sometimes you'll ask them. But it's more about a human experience on the little time we have here on this earth, just to try and I think it's as important just to look at these moments as and when they happen. And sometimes that's that. But other times I keep in touch with people and I get to know them, and they're still friends now, and I meet up with them, you know. But yeah, that video is it's a nice piece of kind of different moments, and hopefully the words come across of how much you learn from these people, you know.
Yeah, and that connection, like you say, some of these moments, they're transient, they're, you know, you don't ever see them again. Then there's other people you keep in touch with, and then sometimes lose touch with because the mobile phone gets lost or something changes or who knows what. And then there's these chance encounters that are sometimes really magical as well. You know, you're in touch with someone for a period of time, you see them regularly or every time you're back in that place, and then you don't see them for ages, and then all of a sudden they pop up again, you know. And it's amazing how, you know, it's amazing in the book how these characters, you know, that you're meeting, you know, and they are characters, they're totally amazing, you know. So many of the stories and the people are like, it's very surprising, you know. I totally recommend digging in, because there's a lot of talent in this book. There's a lot of talented musicians, writers, people with amazing original thoughts as well, you know. Like so many of those people could be doing TED Talks, you know, like the way the wisdom is amazing.
Yeah, it really is. There's a guy I follow on Instagram called New York Nico. I don't know whether anyone else does, but I'd recommend giving him a follow, because like he's calls himself, I think, something to do with like New York's top talent scout or something like that. And it's like in his profile, but it's just everyday people. And obviously Humans of New York has its place too, and it's photography and quotes, and that's great. But I love New York Nico's work because his stuff is all these everyday people he meets who are all got their own thing. It's just sometimes about noticing it. You know, we're so busy and we're so caught up with our own stuff, and you know, everyone's got these quirks and these things to share, and it's about trying to get that childlike curiosity back into our lives, I think. And it's one thing I'm very thankful for with the work I do. And it's one, I think everyone finds it in different ways. It might be getting your hands in the earth and planting your own vegetables, and that for me is just as valuable and beautiful. It's just whatever that version is of, remembering to notice things, remembering to notice those smaller things around us. And for me, that's people. It always has been, and it's beautiful when you see it all like that, because it doesn't mean you don't get annoyed with people. It doesn't mean you don't butt heads, but it's just trying to get back when you can, recentered with that space of of noticing and being curious.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed there's a couple of questions come through in the chat as well. So this one you talked about a little bit maybe before with someone trying to, like, have you got a cigarette? But it's not always going to be that case. So the question is from Ollie, and there's often a wall between us and the people who are homeless in our communities. How do you first approach people?
Yeah, so well, thanks for your question, Ollie. I feel that it is really that first initial approach that's very important at times, because I think the more you do that, the more you get to know. For me, I can only answer it, sometimes rather than answers, it's better to give a response. And I feel like my response to that is like through personal experience. I realized that a lot of it's all in a dialogue, and you've got people you see in a certain way based on many other bits of information that have flown at you to lead you to that point in your life. And it's not always an easy thing to just dissolve that straight away, but try and sort of see people for the essence of who they are. And it's about really, I sometimes say to people, play out I'm answering this as far as like in an individual way, like how do you get close to this stuff? And I feel like it's about sometimes playing out your worst case scenario, and I say, if I'm in the middle of the city and it's busy and I go up and I say hello and how are you, and chance to smile at someone and see what they're up to, maybe ask them if I could sit down and have a chat. Worst case scenario, they're probably going to tell me to get lost, or maybe they're going to do it in worse language, but ultimately it is what it is. And I'm going to take that and not apply that experience to the next person I see, leave it isolated in that moment. But in a kind of broader sense, and as a society, I do not think this is all happening for I don't, the people who are in charge of the bills to reduce homelessness and the people going into Westminster each day, I don't expect them to understand this issue, because they're running around all the time doing other things, and they're not listening to people in this way. So it's really important that at a street level we all have more compassion, and then apply more pressure for more urgent compassion at a political level. But I think as a society, the reason is because people are dehumanized, because the more that you make out that it's someone's fault and the mistakes they made in their life, the less you have to care. And it doesn't matter where you come from or what your kind of what you have or have not, and where you are on like a scale of equity and what your net worth is. It's like, I don't think anyone walks past someone really on the street and doesn't feel something. Now, I'm not going to say feel compassion and empathy straight away, but I think no matter how much you have, I think you're wondering, why is that person there? And God, I keep on seeing loads of people. Is this just a bunch of people who made bad decisions and made mistakes? Should there be more support for them? And even if you're really, whoever you are, you're taking your friends around a city, it's not okay. It shouldn't be normal. That's the biggest point for me, is it's been normalized. It's been normalized to see this as something that's how we have to be within a city of such affluence, wherever you're living or whatever town. It's like, things don't have to be this way. So part of the problem is remembering this is not normal. It's not normal to see thousands of people sleeping on the street. It's not normal to see nearly 1,000 people, well, just less than, but that's only the count, dying on the street last year in 2020 in the UK. Only 3% of those being COVID-related deaths. So this thing is increasing. It's been steadily increasing for a long time, and for me, it's telling these stories. That's my version of it. Retelling the story of how we feel about this issue and the thousands of people, millions of people worldwide that come under this word like homeless. And then trying to do our best to just knock on the door a bit harder and make people see this in a different way, who are in charge of, the systemic change that's needed. Of course, I'm not going to sit here and say that we don't need more affordable housing. We don't need more support systems and shelters. I mean, it's another conversation, but to wrap up, I mean, of course I could go on then about what help looks like and all of that stuff, because some of the hostels people are sent to after, trying to get back on your feet, as it were, you wouldn't put your family or friends in there, it's so yeah. But I'd say look, individually, it's about trying to get past your own inner dialogue, and then speaking broadly, it's more rehumanizing people and kind of trying to see this in a different way.
Yeah, and like you say, remembering this is not normal. When you're showing those photographs earlier on, you see it more profoundly somewhere like Skid Row, because the whole thing is is pitched up tense. But like you say, it shouldn't be normal anywhere on any scale. It's important to remember. And Actually, there's one other question here. I think links really well here, because you were talking about rehumanizing, dehumanizing, and people being dehumanized, and it's from Lizzie, and it's, do you think the dehumanizing aspect is similar to refugees living in camps, for example? How people need to be reminded that there are unique individuals with their own stories behind the big headlines and statistics.
Exactly that. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your question, and that is, that covers it as well. And to lead on from that and dive a bit deeper, it is very similar. My girlfriend Jazz, who actually, she gave a talk with you guys, hosted by Hawkwood recently, and she runs an organization, the Worldwide Tribe, and we have a lot of similarities in the work that we do, albeit like different people coming from different places in their life. But it really is hard sometimes to see the way that people kind of almost actually have this selective compassion, because sometimes people, and the flack that she gets is, we've got our own problems and people who are on the streets of our country, and we need to be helping those people first. And I feel like these things aren't selective. I feel like you either want to live that way or you don't. And I think right now there's a lot of people who are fed a certain narrative about this, and yeah, we've got to reshape it. We've got to reshape it to try and create the change that's required. And honestly, I'm hopeful about it, really hopeful about it, because I see it. I really do see it. Like when I go into schools and I give talks, as I mentioned earlier, like usually most of the time, being like really candid, that's actually the way I get paid, even in schools that have budget to like be able to bring speakers in, or like brands and companies who have me to come in and give a talk. Because Do Something for Nothing isn't a charity or not for profit or anything like that. So that's how from 5 years ago I've managed to steadily bring back an income into my life. And when I go into some of these schools, they're kind of really well, I mean, it's like the creme de la creme in these places, and I see the hope in young people who, even though they've had a really privileged background, they're going to be some of the future thinkers of this world, as I hope people from less privileged backgrounds will be as well. But it's like, they ain't got all of these hardcore images attached to words like homelessness and refugee as we do as adults. Our conditioning, it's about unraveling that conditioning. And as I mentioned earlier as well, looking at it in a way of becoming curious again. And chatting and having discussions about this, because also none of us should feel guilty for this. It's not going to help anybody walking around with guilt of, oh my God, I should do more, why aren't I doing enough? It's like, no, that's not going to get you moving. Wake up tomorrow, and when you can, it's not about putting pressure on, like, be available for the people around you. It might start with a phone call to your mate who might be down and feeling low at the moment. The things you can do within your like vicinity of like you and your life. But as I said, there'll probably be a time, some point in the not too distant future, maybe beyond, where you'll be confronted with a stranger in that situation, and then it's about like trying to reach out in the same way as you would. And I'm telling you, all the experiences I've had with people, sometimes it is a cagey interaction to begin with, but a lot of the time it's amazing to see the way that dissolves after you just do the most simple thing, which is what we can all do, which is have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I urge everyone here to follow you with what you do on Instagram and the Do Something for Nothing account, because you provide that reminder that all of what you just said basically, but it provides people with that reminder if they need it, to get the hang of being more present, noticing those things and having those conversations, and noticing where there's an opportunity to be able to offer something back as well. As we talked about earlier, it's not just your skill as how you started out being a hairdresser, a barber. It's like, what have you got? So asking those questions.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, and it's so funny how secondary the haircuts become. I know it's still a really good way to like show an image of this like before and after, but for me it's just a vehicle now. I only do Jazz's hair, my girlfriend, and like a couple close friends, because anyone else I'm like, it's too much expectation. Like I can't, like, because for me, when I'm out on the street, there's like none of that. It's just like, yeah, do what you want. I'm like, cool, let's get on with the chat, and I'll do whatever I want. I won't think about it. But I couldn't go back into the salon and do this. I have massive respect for any hairdressers who are still doing that and having to make sure someone's like on point and they're getting paid for it. But my point being that, yeah, I'm not, of course, all this stuff is just a vehicle for what we all do when we have the time. And, yeah, reminders of that is very important. We're not here for very long, and it's good to be quite aware of that. I personally just, especially the last year, more aware than ever of most of us. We are of our own mortality, and the fact that, like, what do you want to do with your time here? It's part of that for me as well. Like, I'm not doing this for some crusade because I want to be a good person and pat myself on the back. It's just I need this. I feed off it. I'm not going to lie that it's therapeutic for me as well when I go out there and I do this. And that's not to like sensationalize anything. It's just it's part of being human. So yeah, whatever you can find to get that in your life, I think is an important endeavor for anybody.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really appreciate it. I'm sure everyone that's seen your work tonight totally gets that, the motivation. It seems very clear, it seems very pure to me. Joshua, thanks so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate you being here. I'm really excited to see the book make its way out, and for people to discover what you're doing through those pages, and for those pages to last longer than those Instagram stories or posts might do. Because it's a really solid way of being able to remind yourself and to look through and to and to have that connection.
Yeah, really. Yeah, well, thanks, Matt. Like, great to chat to you. Obviously, we didn't get a chance to mention obviously how we know each other and our work previously, which is kind of going back a few years now, working together. And I just feel, yeah, look, I'm really thankful if anyone wants to pre-order the book, because it goes to the right place. But also just yeah, I'd love to hear about what you're doing. For me, this is a sharing thing. I need fuel, and I'd love to hear about other people who are doing things in their community, as I do a lot. But new connections coming out of lockdown, especially in the pandemic. One thing to sort of just mention briefly is, like, I think we can all relate now to sort of being starved of some of these basic interactions in our life. And, like, when we come out of this, let's try and take a different look and a different approach. And we do forget quite easily. So a few years' time, this will all be in the history books. But I think from this moment and from this time, let's try and take some of that collective shared kind of like feeling of kind of want to see those people we love and feeling isolated into, like, interacting a little bit better with each other each day.
Yeah, well, and as Lizzie, we've got, as Esther said, thanks for organising this, and Lizzie, thanks so much for the conversation, so insightful and really beautiful to hear and see the individual stories. I echo that, Lizzie, exactly that. And like, I'd love to have you back. I mean, that on behalf of Hawkwood, I'm sure you'll be back to do another conversation or to be involved in other conversations at Hawkwood as well, and to visit too, of course, as we
that would be ideal. Yeah, well, we're hopefully, yeah, that would be on the horizon soon. I'd love to make that happen.
Yeah. So Joshua will be back. We'll follow up. Maybe once the book's out, we can have Joshua to come back, and we can talk a bit more about people's experiences and thoughts and questions after they've managed to read it and connect with those stories. So let's do that. And
brilliant. Yeah. Thanks to everyone watching. I appreciate everyone attending, sticking around. To everyone from Hawkwood, the little tech gurus in the back there doing all this stuff, making it flow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate all of you.